So, good morning children, this is your Priya ma'am from Alpha Group of Institutions. So, today we are going to discuss the continuation of nationalism in Europe. That is, we have completed 2 sessions, isn't it? So, nearly 70% of the lesson we had already discussed in 2 sessions. Now, this is the third part of the lesson. It means the last session of this lesson. Okay. So, in this unit we had previously discussed till the Siemens and Lahore, right. We have discussed all those things. Now, today we are going to discuss about the civil disobedience movement. Okay. So, in the last class we have discussed regarding the Lahore session of Congress, which was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, the demand of Purna Swaraj. They decided to celebrate what? They decided to celebrate 26th January every year as Republic Day. Okay. And the next thing what we have decided again is how they decided to celebrate 26th January 1930 as the Independence Day of India, and today we are celebrating this as Republic Day. Okay. They also planned for a pledge by the people to struggle for complete independence. Now, what happened is when Mahatma Gandhiji decided to find out a new way which led to the beginning of civil disobedience movements. So, what was the civil disobedience movement and why was the step of famous salt march carried on by Gandhiji? So, today we are going to discuss about the what are the topics, how the civil disobedience, what was the civil disobedience movement and what are the steps, what are the famous steps of the steps of famous salt march which was carried out by Gandhiji. Okay children, now let us see. The first thing is development that led to the launching of civil disobedience movement. In Indians launched a powerful struggle against the Simon Commission. The government resorted to repression. Great repression made the life of the people highly miserable. So, Lahore conspiracy case and Meerut conspiracy case created discontent among the Indians. Lahore Congress of 1929 declared Purna Swaraj as its aim and decided to launch the civil disobedience movement. So, Gandhiji inaugurated the movement by breaking the salt law of Dandi. Now, salt march, salt satyagraha. Gandhiji decided to inaugurate the civil disobedience movement by breaking the salt law. Gandhiji and 78 of his followers started a march on foot from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi. On 6 April 1930, they reached Dandi. Gandhiji prepared salt by using seawater, broke the salt law and inaugurated the movement. The government imposed heavy tax on salt. Moreover, the production of salt was the monopoly of the government. So, the price of salt was very high, therefore, Gandhiji opposed the salt law. The first thing which Gandhiji thought was, children, to unite people. There should not be any separation between the people, and what he thought is to unite the people. This could only be done if the problems of all the cases of society to be taken into consideration, if we take all the problems which the people are facing in the society, if we take all the problems into consideration, so with this view what happened is Gandhiji sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin on 31st January 1930. He mentioned in that regarding all the 11 demands which they are in need. And some of these were of general interest, others were specific demands of different classes from industrialists to peasants. The main reason behind including demands of these groups was to bring everyone together in a united campaign. The most important demand is what? Along all was the abolition of salt tax. Now, Gandhiji, He gave a view that salt being an essential food item is consumed by all whether we are rich or whether poor. So, the tax on salt and the government monopoly over its production seemed injustice to him. So, salt is a basic need of a human being, whether they are poor or rich. It is a must and should ingredient which is used for food, and the tax which were asked to pay on salt was injustice. So, Mahatma Gandhi, what he was told is, he declared that this law as the most oppressive phase of the British rule. He was not able to accept these taxes on the salt. Okay, that is why he started inaugurating these. Then the main features of the civil disobedience movement. These things, children, we have already discussed. Like, what is Mahatma Gandhi had given a ultimatum in his letter. That if he demands would not be, if his the demands would not be fulfilled, the 11 demands which was given by the Mahatma Gandhi to the British rule, if it is not fulfilled by 11th March, the Congress will launch a civil disobedience movement. Okay. Lord Irwin did not considered it as this led to the beginning of the non-violence movement and non-cooperation movement, which was started with the famous Gandhi March, famous Salt March, which was headed by our Mahatma Gandhi. Okay. Now, so on 12th March, Gandhiji started his famous Salt March, which was accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. Okay. Now, Gandhiji covered 240. Gandhiji covered how many? 240 miles in 24 days. In 24 days, he had covered 240 miles from his ashram. His ashram's name is Sabarmati. Which is in the Gujarat coastal area, located in the Gujarat coastal town of Dandi. So, thousands and thousands of people came to hear Gandhiji's wherever he was stopped. Everybody were waiting for his way of speech to be heard by them. Okay. Now, he has explained to them about his ideas of Swaraj. Explain the ideas of Swaraj and urge them to carry them most peacefully, to defy the British in non-violent method. Okay, on 6th April, Gandhiji reached Dandi. And he broke the salt law by boiling seawater. Now, let us see the main features of the civil disobedience movement, which was headed over by the Gandhiji, and at last how Gandhiji and Mr. Ambedkar, Dr. Ambedkar, the verses, Gandhiji versus Ambedkar regarding their views on their perspectiveness. Okay, children? Yes. So, now what happened here is, here what happened, the Dandi March. The Dandi March was seen as the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. But here the question arises as to how to differ from non-cooperation movement. Okay. Now, here the civil disobedience movement differed in the way that in this case people not only refused to cooperate, but the British government, they were also asked to break the British laws. So, this led to the following actions by the various groups in India. Those are given here. First one is, Gandhiji led a march on foot from Sabarmati to Dandi. He broke the salt law and Dandi and inaugurated the movement. People broke salt law in many places. Foreign goods were boycotted. Liquor shops were picketed. Government servants resigned their jobs. Forest laws were broken. People refused to pay taxes. Leaders were arrested. Workers attacked the government offices. Gandhiji called off the movement on 5th March 1931 under the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. He agreed to attend the second round table conference. It was restarted when Gandhiji returned from London. It was finally called off in 1934. Okay. Now, if you look here, children, thousands of people, they had broken the salt law also in their coastal areas, and they manufactured salt and demonstrated it from in front of the government factories itself. So foreign clothes were also totally boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, peasants they started avoiding the taxes, not paying the taxes, they stopped paying revenues and like chukidari taxes. So village officials they also resigned their jobs, and these forest laws were violated by entering into reserved areas to collect the wood and graze cattle. So whatever they are trying to conserve the forest areas, those laws were also broke by the people, and they started cutting the woods and grazing their cattle. So even that is not good for our environment, right? That is why Gandhiji written, like he called off that movement in the March 1931. So what happened, we will see next. So the difference between non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. Before that, let us discuss that, like the people refused to cooperate with the government during the non-cooperation movement. People broke the laws during the civil disobedience movement. Muslims participated in large numbers in the non-cooperation movement, but Muslims participation was very less in the civil disobedience movement. No tax campaign was not there in non-cooperation movement. People refused to pay taxes in civil disobedience movement. So these developments made what happened is, under non-cooperation movement terrified the British government, children. In order to control such activities, the government started arresting Congress leaders one by one, and this resulted into ferocious clashes between the people and police. So Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a devotion, like he was a devout disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, he was arrested by the police in 1930, and this led to the demonstration by police in April 1930. Like what happened, this led to the demonstration by the angry crowds of Peshawar. Now police, what happened, they started firing on the demonstrators and killed many of the people, the demonstrators. Later on what happened, Mahatma Gandhi was arrested, and this led to violent demonstration by the industrial workers in Sholapur. So they attacked the police stations, municipal buildings, law courts and railway stations, children. So here we can say that they tried to attack every symbol of British rule. As government got terrified with such incidents, it became brutal with the peaceful Satyagrahis. The government started attacking even the women and children. About 1 lakh people were arrested. Now what happened is, at this situation, as the situation was growing worse and worse, Gandhiji was he was not able to tolerate these sorts of violent actions. Then he decided to stop the movement, call off the movement. On March 5, 1931, he entered into the pact with Irwin, which later came to be known as Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Okay, now due to this pact, Gandhiji agreed to participate in the Round Table Conference. The first Round Table Conference was boycotted by the Congress in London, and the government consented to release the political prisoners. And in the month of December, the year 1931, again Gandhiji went to London to attend the Round Table Conference, but the conference failed, and Gandhiji again he came back with a disappointment. When he reached India, he found that the government had initiated a new form of repression. Like the leaders like Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru, they were both in jail. Both the leaders were in jail. Congress was declared as illegal, and various new measures were imposed by the government. When Gandhiji was not there, in the Gandhiji's absence, everything turned upside down. So what happened is, the Congress itself got the name as it is an illegal way of struggle, right? Now again what happened, Gandhiji again launched the civil disobedience movement, and it did continue for about a year. For 1 year he continued this civil disobedience movement, but what happened, it lost its strength. Why? Muslim participation was very less in the civil disobedience movement. So whatever the reasons behind the decline of the movement, and what was the perception of the participants of civil disobedience movements, what happened is, to understand the that led people to participate in the movement. We first need to know the different social groups which participated in that. Okay. So, here the difference between non-cooperation, some of the Muslim people, they were participated large numbers in the non-cooperation movement, and the same Muslim participants were very less in the civil disobedience movement. Campaign was not there in non-cooperation movement, but people they refused to pay the taxes in civil disobedience movement. So, these are the basics, the just simple differences between the non-cooperation and civil disobedience movement, children. So, social groups which participated in civil disobedience movement. Social groups which participated in civil disobedience movement. Okay. Rich peasants depression and fall in prices affected them badly. They demanded reduction in land revenue. Swaraj meant reduction of taxes for them. Poor peasants' depression affected them badly. They demanded reduction in rent. Swaraj meant what? Reduction of rent for them. Now, business classes. They demanded protection against the import of foreign goods. They wanted a rupee sterling exchange rate that would discourage import. They formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920. They also formed the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries. They gave financial help to the movement and refused to sell the foreign goods. Next one is industrial workers. They were poorly paid. Conditions of work were miserable. Swaraj meant better wages and working conditions for them. So, when we are here to discuss about the case of social groups which participated in the civil disobedience movement, the rich peasant communities of rural areas, the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh had actively participated in this movement, and they were the producers of cash crops, which were not much affected by the fall in the prices of the agricultural products. As their cash income disappeared, they found it difficult to pay the government tax. So, for them participation in civil disobedience movement was equal to the reduction in the government revenue. They started organizing their communities of civil disobedience movement. Even those who were reluctant were also forced to participate. But when the movement was called off in 1931 without reduction in revenue, they felt really disappointed. Hence, what happened is they refused to participate in 1932 when the movement was started again. And when we are talking about the second point, like poor peasant depression, the poor peasants who had small lands, they were generally tenants. They used to be on rent. Okay, they were very badly hit and affected with the fall of prices in the food grains. Okay, they demanded for the cancellation of the revenue or the rent they had to pay. When the price has fell down, they were not able to pay the taxes or revenues. So, they were requesting either to cancel the rent or the revenue. So, for this what they have done is they organized various movements like under socialists and communists. These poor peasants, what they have done is they were unable to get support from the Congress because the Congress is not willing to support no rent, because there should be minimum justice, right. So, the Congress is not supporting for them no rent. So, campaigns must be, it might be upset. So, it might upset the rich peasant and also the landlords. So, for these poor peasants, the Swaraj means reduction of rent. They think that Swaraj means the reduction of rent only. Okay. And now again, if we talk about the business classes and their relation with civil disobedience movement, we need to know about the condition of their business houses at that time. Okay. During the First World War, the Indian businessmen and industrialists earned huge profits and became more powerful. How this happened will be discussed later, children. So, as they wanted to expand their business, they started reacting against the British policies that were against the expansion of the business. They had their own issues such as protection of business from outside, competition also from this, and they demanded for the protection against the imported goods which they are getting from the foreign. Okay. They also demanded for rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage the import goods. Okay. The last one comes here is the industrial workers. The industrialists, in order to demand for their rights formed like from Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries in 1927, Indian industrialists under the leadership of some important industrialists like Purushottam Das, Thakur Das and G.D. Birla attacked the British control over the Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was started, okay, when it was launched for the first time. They not only they participated, but not only in the participation, but also they refused to pay like buying or selling the goods which were imported from the foreign countries. Okay, and most of them like Swaraj means at the time what these industrial workers thought is Swaraj means when the British restrictions on business will be removed and the Indian trade and industry would flourish. So here these industrial workers were very poorly paid because of this industrial business classes, right. So what they thought is this Swaraj means for them it is like better wages and good conditions, good atmosphere in the working area. So they were worried about the spread of any militant activities that could distract or spoil the business, and also they were also not in the favor of growing socialism among the young Congress members. So now we know about the participation of the industrialists and how they step back to the participation in the movement. But what about the industry workers, children? These industry workers did not participate in the movement. Only it was in Nagpur where the participation was seen among the workers. So they followed the Gandhian program by boycotting foreign goods as part of their movements against low wages and inadequate working. So it did so in order to keep industrialists with them so that the force against the British rule may not lose in strength. Okay. So the main contribution of the civil disobedience movement. So before that, children, now we know about the participation of the different groups, social groups in the civil disobedience movement, okay, and also the reasons behind their reluctance like to keep continuing with it. So now let us check the limits of civil disobedience movements, okay. Now this is main contributions of the civil disobedience movement. Civil disobedience movement was the first struggle to win Purna Swaraj or complete independence. It was based on non-violent Satyagraha. Gandhian ideas were widely followed. Women participated in large numbers in this movement. It was a real mass movement. Different social groups participated. It was an open challenge to the British rule. And these people, the people openly disobeyed the British laws. Okay, children. So the main limitations of the civil disobedience movement. Dalits did not participate in the civil disobedience movement because the Congress did not give importance to their demands. Many Muslims did not participate in it. They thought that the Congress was moving close to the Hindu Mahasabha. Communal riots occurred in many places. Disunity between Hindus and Muslims started now. Now industrial workers participation was minimum. Okay. Now the limitations of civil disobedience, children. Though various social groups had come along with Congress to participate in this civil disobedience movement, but there were still many people who were not moved by the abstract concept of Swaraj. One such group was the untouchables. In 1930, they began calling themselves the Dalits or oppressed. At the beginning, initial stages, Congress also did not raise the issues of Dalits. They didn't take into notice actually to a serious issue. They did so because they were not interested in offending the high caste conservative Hindus known as Sanatanis. Okay. Now it was Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was the one who declared that it is necessary to include the untouchables also in this movement for achieving independence. He once said that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability was not eliminated. He called the untouchables as Harijans or the children of God. If you see in this slide, children, the efforts which are made by the Gandhiji for the upliftment of Dalits, for the development of Dalits. Gandhiji was against untouchability. He said that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability was not abolished. He called the untouchables Harijans or sons of gods, and he organized a Satyagraha to get temple entry and access to public wells, tanks, roads and schools of Dalits. He cleaned Harijan colonies, and in his ashram there were no caste feelings. He asked the upper caste Hindus to give up the inhuman practice of untouchabilities. Okay. Now here Gandhiji, he led Satyagraha in favor of Harijans, these Dalits. In order to secure entry for them into temples, he also fought for the basic rights of the Harijans, such as they then in need of use, like they also need the water from wells and tanks, they also need to use the roads, right. So he fought for the basic rights of the Harijans, these Dalits, such as to accessing the public wells, tanks, roads and schools. And not only these things, he also included, he also made the upper caste people to realize that, to change their perception and give away the evil of untouchability. They used to treat these Dalits as untouchables, and they used to treat very badly. So he just suggested these upper grade people to what? To leave that feeling of untouchability, which is inhuman practice. So while all these struggles were going on for Dalits, some leaders who belong to this Dalit community, they started organizing themselves for resolving various issues. One side, when Gandhiji is fighting for their welfare, some leaders in their groups, they started fighting for their own issues, bringing up the new issues. Okay. So for this, what happened? They started demanding for reserved seats in educational institutions and a separate electorate. So what they would do is, they would choose Dalit members for legislative council. The political Dalit leaders, they believed that if they will be politically empowered, they can resolve the various problems of their country. If they become the leaders in the political parties, easily the Dalits will not be avoided. So that so many benefits may happen to the Dalit community. So they were forcing to get their reserved seats in the political things and also the schools works. Okay. Therefore, what happened is the Dalit participation in the civil disobedience movement was limited, particularly in the areas of Maharashtra and Nagpur, where their organization was quite strong. Okay. Now here our Dr. Ambedkar gives an entry. So here the clashes between Gandhiji and Ambedkar started. So what happened is, there were some moments when the Dalit demanded demands which clashed with the ideology of Swaraj. One such incident was the second round table conference, which was held in September 1931 to December 1931, okay, September 7th to December 1 in the year 1931, where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's demand of separate electorates for Dalit clashed with Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. So, here Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy and Ambedkar's his demands for separate electorates both started clashing. So, when the British government conceded, Ambedkar's demand, Gandhiji began a fast unto death. He was demanding a fast until death. Fasting means you know right, without eating food. Gandhiji was one of the view that separate electorates for Dalits would slow down the process of their integration in society. At last what happened is Ambedkar, he also gave up and accepted with Gandhiji's position, and the result was Purna Pact of September 1932. Now, if we see here children, Dr. Ambedkar demanded separate electorates for the Dalits. He thought that a share in political power would help in their upliftment. Gandhiji opposed separate electorates. He thought that it would create disunity, so they clashed in the second round table conference. This is what we have discussed now, right? Purna Pact. So, it was signed between Gandhiji and Ambedkar in September 1932. Gandhiji brought an end to his fast. He accepted the demand for reservation of seats for Dalits in the legislatures. Ambedkar agreed to give up the demand for separate electorates. Now, the Purna Pact gave the Dalits or scheduled caste the reserved seats. This Purna Pact gave the Dalits the reserved seats in provincial and central legislative council. But there was a condition that they were to be voted in by the general electorate apart from Dalits. The Muslims also later on felt alienated from the Congress. So, they had their own reasons for that. Okay, children. Now, let us discuss the next complete different topic. Okay, the image. This is the image of Bharat Mata. So, nationalism, as we know children, nationalism as we know spreads when people feel commonness among themselves. This happens when they believe that they belong to the same nation. But the question arises that how the people from different communities who have different beliefs, languages and cultures, their lifestyles and habits will come together to make the idea of nation a reality. So, while this sense of collective belonging came due to some reasons like through their experience of united struggle or because of the variety of cultural processes through which nationalism captured people's imagination. Now, history and fiction, folk songs and folk dance, popular prints and symbols played a vital, a most important role in making the nationalism. Another thing is Vande Mataram. So, it was a prayer to Bharat Mata written by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya. This is a very important point children, you have to remember for your life as an Indian. So, the prayer for Bharat Mata was written by what? Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya. Okay. Now, Vande Mataram became the war cry of the Indians. War cry means you know the shouting while leaving or fighting against the British, they used to use the word Vande Mataram. So, it was later included in the novel what? Anandamath. Okay. Now, listen, Vande Mataram was written by whom? Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya. So, the identity of the nation is generally symbolized in the form of a figure or image. So, this helps in creating an image which people can relate to, okay, they can act to. So, in the 20th century, as the nationalism was growing in our country, the identity of Indians became to be visualized as Bharat Mata. So, till today we are following that. Today's Bharat Mata is different, but this is the image which they followed in those days. Okay. The identity of India came to be visualized as what? Bharat Mata. To start with, it was Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya. He only created the image through his poem Vande Mataram. and he wrote this poem in 1870, in which he wrote a hymn like for his motherland. Later this poem was added in the novel Anandamath and was widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. So later what happened is Abanindranath Tagore painted an image of Bharat Mata. He only painted, and he painted her as an ascetic, as a sage, okay. She looks calm, divine, and the image, in that image Bharat Mata looks like very calm, divine and spiritual. In the following years, Bharat Mata was painted into different forms. Today you know how about Bharat Mata looks, right? Yes. Different artists painted her in their own way. The painting was circulated in popular prints. Soon their devotion to this mother figure came to be seen as evidence of one's nationalism. Okay, children? Now, these are the stamps and images which we are discussing here. Now, the national flag. During the Swadeshi movement, a tricolor flag, red, green and yellow was developed. Red, green and yellow was developed. You can see here children, red, green and yellow, this is what developed. Okay, it has 8 lotuses representing the 8 provinces of the British India. It also had crescent moon which represented Hindus and Muslims. You can see the crescent moon, 8 lotuses and the tricolor, okay. Now in 1921, Gandhiji designed the Swaraj flag, and it was also a flag, tricolor flag, red, green and white. It had a spinning wheel which represents the Gandhian idea of self-help. And here this was the flag which was introduced by our Gandhiji, the same red, green, but the yellow was changed into white color. In the between the spinning wheel, here our Indians, we have discussed, right, that we started weaving our own cloths. So spinning wheel was just made in the center, right. It representing the Gandhian idea of what? Self-help. The flag became a symbol of the nation. So it created the feeling of oneness. The people carried flag in protest marches and rallies. Till that we do not have any images or flags or anything else, children. When they created the tricolor flag, people started carrying it for each and every struggle and fights and wars. Okay. Now let us talk about the revival of folklore. Okay. So the revival of folklore. Nationalists toured the villages to collect the folk songs and legends. Rabindranath Tagore collected a number of folk songs and legends. In Madras, Natesha Shastri published a 4-volume collection of Tamil folk tales, the folklore of southern India. The folk songs and legends gave a true picture of Indian culture. They showed their all thoughts and characteristics of Indians. They created national pride among the people. So, this is a image of folklore of South India. Okay, children. Now, coming to the discussion part, like the idea which we used to create a feeling of nationalism was our own inauguration or organization or our own history, like our own past. In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore began collecting ballads, necessary rhyme, like nursery rhymes and myths, and in Madras. And Madras, who was like Natesha Shastri, published a massive 4-volume collection of Tamil folk tales. And the folklore of southern India, the picture which you are seeing now, like this is a true demonstration of the people's real thoughts and the characteristics. Okay, children. With this the chapter is over. Let us have a conclusion now. The conclusion of this session was like, as last we can say that a growing outrage towards the oppressive rule of the colonial government was the main reason that brought all the people of India together to initiate a common struggle for freedom in the first half of the 20th century. Okay. The Congress under Mahatma Gandhi tried to channelize the problems of people into organized movements of independence. So, with the help of this movement, he tried to forge a national unity among the Indians. But as we have read in the chapter, that various social groups also joined the struggle with their own perceptions and aspirations, and a situation of differences between these groups also arose. So, the Congress made several attempts to keep these groups together without fighting. The Congress fight only for the unity and the welfare of the Indians, and they did not even encourage or support the people or the groups who were involved in the violence. Okay. So, that is why our Congress also made several attempts to just simply to keep all these groups who were involved in this fight together, but there was some times also where the differences also grew stronger, than it became difficult for the Congress. Congress also sometimes felt very tough to console or control these groups, and they even sometimes they called back the movements also, and it became difficult to the Congress to keep these groups together. So, here we can say that it was a time when a new nation was emerging with various people demanding freedom from colonial rule. So, we have come across all the sorts of struggle, violence as well as non-violence, how many leaders involved, how many groups, how many all the tribal city people and Dalits, and also the villages, how they had struggled, what all the things, what all the movements were organized, everything we have seen in this. So, this is just not a full history or past of what we had struggled for our nationalism in India, it is just a part. Okay children, there are more and more to read and learn. Okay. So, I think you have understood, you have felt the struggle which our Indians, our ancestors had suffered and struggled for our freedom. Okay. So, with this we have completed the session children. Not only session, we have completed the whole chapter, that is history lesson 2. In history chapter 2 is what? Nationalism in India we have completed. Now, the activity part is already we have completed reading the brief first and second answers, right. Now, you have to read and write the home test in what? The brief answer questions. The brief questions is there are 1, 2, 3, 4. In first and third question you have subdivisions of 3 or 4 parts, right. So, you have to read, already 2 you have read, now today you have to read 3, read well along with the spellings, write your home test, get a parent signature and then submit in the group. Maximum of you are not submitting the test children, you are submitting only the classwork, and I am telling in each and every class to follow what ma'am is saying you, but you are not even listening to that. I want all of you to submit your activities in the group. Okay. So, this is your activity, you have to read and write the home test in the brief question answers 1, 2, 3, 4 and get a parent sign and then submit in a group. Okay children. So, thank you. This is your Priya ma'am from Alpha Group of Institutions signing off children. Thank you children.